Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Tracey Lockwood. Tracey Lockwood has been a friend of mine for several years, and I'm very happy to have her in my life. She is one of what I call one of the luminary ladies of the Blue Ridge, and she is a medium and a minister. She works with a universal mind, is her, I guess, for lack of a better term, spiritual service that she does at the local Unitarian Church as well. She is a renowned medium and the medium's medium, from what other mediums have to say. For those of you that don't know, a medium is someone who can speak to those who have passed on. Tracey Lockwood also is the host of the show here on Revolution Radio, From a Medium's Perspective, which comes on right after my show. So without further ado, let me welcome my very good friend, Tracey Lockwood, to the Just Bernard Show. Welcome, Tracey.
Thank you. Hello, beautiful Bernard.
Hello, beautiful Tracey. It's great to hear your voice. We're constantly messaging each other. We don't get much of a chance to talk, so I have to book you on the show.
Oh, well, we're busy people, and it'll be right back at you in not too long from now. So
right,
fair trade, fair trade.
Very, very good. So with that being said, Tracey, how is the show going? Are you enjoying your time here on Revolution Radio?
Oh my goodness, this has been the best avenue for me. I love radio as a venue. You can broadcast in your PJs if you're so inclined, and no one knows any better. Not in them today. No imagery going on in people's minds there. And I've done the show now for just over a year.
I was gonna say, happy anniversary. It's got to be a year.
Yep. And thanks to you, I'm here. I wouldn't have probably been so bold as to approach Revolution Radio on my own, and you're producing my short show at the very beginning and helping me learn the nuts and bolts of radio was immensely helpful. I will be ever grateful.
Well, I'm honored. I am honored to be a part of that. And I remember back, God, several months before you started on the show, we had talked about it. And I think we just kind of gave you that final nudge and said, okay, Revolution Radio is ready for you.
Yes. And I appreciate that so much. And I'm just loving it. It's reaching a lot of people. I put the episodes up on my YouTube channel, which is just Medium Tracey Lockwood. It has a really long URL. It's like Tracey Lockwood Psychic Reading Medium. I'm like, please help me change that, YouTube.
Yeah, it's never fun with them anyway.
But yeah, it's helped me reach a lot of people.
Great. So. I'm so glad. And you do have a very important message to share with the world, as well as the work that we do here on the Just Bernard Show. So I'm very glad that you are a part of what I like to call the new matrix of empowering people and clearing away the cobwebs of our mind.
Oh, yeah. I think when I started the show, I thought, my life is so cool because I get to see, hear, and feel things that go beyond, the average person taking time to do so. It doesn't mean that anyone couldn't do it. It's just I'm lucky in that way, and the perspective that it gives me. I felt like I wanted to share that.
And I'm so glad you are. And that's why you're here today.
Yay.
Let's start off by talking about, kind of how you discovered your gift. To me, either it could be a gift that is born or one that is developed, like you talked about. But what was your pathway and in finding out that you had this gift, and really not only finding out that you had this gift, but learning to come to terms with it? When I posted the radio show, this particular radio show event page on my Facebook page, I had so many people talking about what a hard time that they were having, that it scares them, or that, they have the gift, but it kind of freaks them out. So how did you come about learning that you had the gift, and how did you come to terms with it?
Well, thank you for asking that. And just a note of encouragement to the people that are trying to develop their gift. Um, it is natural, it's a natural process. It's things that abilities that we have naturally as spiritual beings in a physical body. And I'm a psychic instructor as well. I work one-on-one with people to help them develop their gift in particular and do workshops and things like that. But for me, I my first memory actually was being in my crib, and I was very small. I know my feet were about 3 inches long. I was lying on my back. I was kicking my feet at something that had been suspended over the crib for my visual entertainment. And I could see the faces of people and guides and angels peering through, predominantly ancestors and guides, sort of peering through the ethers. And to me, they looked like someone put their face in water and you were only able to see their face and not the rest of their being. And they were kind of swimming through the air. And as a baby, of course, you don't expect people to be standing with their feet planted on the ground. So that seemed kind of natural to me. And as I grew up, I was always very sensitive, but I never encountered anyone who used the nomenclature of psychic or medium. So I went quite a ways through my formative years and young adulthood and into my mid adulthood. And I was really 50 before that label connected for me. And that happened when I was at the Arthur Findlay College of Psychic Science in Essex, England, at Stansted. And I had gone to study with some of the people over there. I knew that it was the world's premier college of mediumship, but I didn't know. I didn't really think of myself as a medium. I just thought of myself as a student. So I bumbled over there, and then one of the instructors said, "Will the next medium take the platform?" And that was me. And it hit me. I was astonished that they saw me as a medium. And in the readings that I got with three of the instructors that I had over there, they're world-class teachers of mediumship. That's what I model my teaching after. They each said, "Why aren't you teaching and giving private readings?" And it really stunned me because it is such a natural gift that it didn't really cross my mind that it would be of interest to anyone else. And apparently they felt that I was actually pretty gifted in that arena, but it just felt pretty natural to me. So that's how I knew that I was a medium, was when somebody else told me. And I think, we hear expressions like clairaudient, like clear hearing, and we think, what is that? Like clear hearing? Is it like hallucinogenic? Are you schizophrenic? Do you hear it physically? But it's actually like a hearing that you would have similar to if you were having a memory. And the same with clairaudience, clairvoyance too. It's the same senses or the same area of your mind that you invoke memories. So if you have a visual memory, are you hallucinating? No, you're not. You're just remembering something and hearing the lyrics to a song run through your mind, that kind of thing. We can hear and feel that way and see that way, but we just don't really remark on it. So a lot of experiences that people have growing up and living life, they don't categorize as being psychic or being a medium, but in fact, uh, we just have the fancy words for that,
Right. And so a lot of people get confused over the terminology. Now, is it fair to say a medium is, for lack of a better term, I guess, how would I say it, a channel to the other world in a way that you could see and speak with those who have transcended this plane of existence?
Well, I kind of think of things on a continuum. I think we're all born with basic instinct. We have a need for food, clothing, shelter, sex, hot, cold. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
We have that animal instinct, and that's not to degrade animals in any way. They have a lot of intuition as well. But then most of us are aware that we have some type of perception that goes beyond those basic instincts, and we call it our intuition. And we said, maybe some of us joke, well, I'm pretty intuitive, but I never listen. Or maybe that, they're very proud of, we're very proud of what we do know and feel. The point that it becomes psychic on a continuum, like going from instinct to intuition into psychic ability, is the point that you ask yourself, how did I know that? How did I know that so and so passed? How did I know to say that about something and it came true? How did I know that was so and so on the phone? And it becomes mediumship when you can answer that question, when you can identify the source of that information. And some of our listeners may come from a traditional Christian background. If you look in First Corinthians, and it talks about the gifts of the Spirit, they're correlated. It's just, again, to nomenclature. A word of knowledge is our intuition. A word of wisdom is psychic ability, and the discerning of spirits is mediumship. And of course, channeling the messages of those beings, the correlation would be tongues and interpretation in a biblical reference. And I know not everybody out there by far is from a Christian background. It's just to clarify some of the mystique that gets lost in translation there. But yes, channeling involves a couple of levels of things. It involves telepathy, which is that mind to mind connection where our clairaudience comes in and we just can tell what somebody else is thinking, whether they're standing in front of us or whether they're across the room or whether they're in another state or another state of being. And empathy is the same. Empathy, though, is an emotional connection. It's a connection soul to soul. And I think of it as the stories that the soul tells. And all of us have done that. We might not realize it again, but perhaps you're sitting on a subway and you're looking across the aisle at someone, and maybe you just know that that person not only is sad, but they probably had an argument. They're having stress with their children and being able to provide for them. And they're in a state of mind where they're feeling like they're helpless. Now, how would you know that from just looking at someone? But we do. We read people's energy all the time. It's just the nomenclature throws people off a bit sometimes.
Right, and actually, I was just going to bring that up because I myself, my quote unquote intuitive gifts or psychic gifts come in many different forms. I've since I was a child, I've had let's say prophetic dreams. I do have the ability to read, I guess, people's energy, like you just said, whether it be, I guess, as an empath, for lack of a better term, and then also I utilize the tool of the tarot card to kind of help bring that story together.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I can't say I've ever had the beauty of connecting with those that have departed. So I guess they're I guess they fall under the umbrella of psychicism, but there are subtle differences in the way that we utilize that gift, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and you are very, very gifted and very excellent at utilizing those gifts in your counseling and working one on one with people. too. I guess the only thing is that it goes further on that spectrum. And, not everybody, some people are sort of naturally, they naturally have spirit encounters, and that kind of is confusing in itself because people assume, if I see a ghost, does that make me a medium? No, it doesn't, because seeing a ghost or seeing a spirit uh, just means that that spirit's will is strong enough that they can manifest themselves to you. Or let's say you have a religious or spiritual experience where, Ganesh or Freya or Jesus or Mother Mary appear to you. Does that make you a medium? And I don't know, like I said, I think everybody can develop their gift all that way along the spectrum, but it doesn't fall under the category of mediumship because it's a spontaneous occurrence.
Hmm.
And disciplining yourself, there's some that don't even need that because they're gifts that were inherent at birth are retained, and they don't have to relearn or um, connect with those gifts. But for most of us, the process of meditation and learning where we end and begin, and then psychic exploration where we connect to others and start developing that gift, it takes a little bit of discipline to bring it along. But I do believe everybody has that capacity. I just think most people probably don't want to spend their time that way. They'd rather go do something else.
Right. And on that note, Tracy, I did have, like I said, we've had several comments and questions, and one person was saying that because of the fact that the spirits are appearing to her spontaneously and whatnot, she feels like she's going crazy. And
Yeah.
what kind of advice do you tell people where for lack of a better term, the medium or the ability to connect with spirits is so strong that they have no control over it? How do you tell people to, I guess, to get, I don't know if I want to say get control, but come to terms with the fact without going crazy? It seems like a
Right.
lot of these gifts, we're all getting a lot of gifts, especially at this time in history. And a lot of us are going through that, like, am I going crazy thing? So, in reference to connecting with spirits, how can you help them?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that our connection with spirit in general, at large, the things that are unseen, are part of our ability that we have through our subconscious, which comes through our right brain. So we usually rely on our left brain, which is the analytical part. And so our left brain is like, that's not possible. How would that happen? Who, what, where, when, why, how many? Prove it. Do you know what I'm saying? But the proofs that come through are not always name, address, and phone number. The proofs that come through have more to do with the emotional makeup of the person, the memories of the person, the characteristics, the gesticulations, etc. And I think knowing that it is natural, like we're sort of clouds. I read this expression, protean clouds of light, we're this molecular field of energy. And it's very natural that we would be able to encounter and connect with each other, all are one. But we forget that because we're in the body state. So it's actually quite alarming because here we are experiencing separateness, and we just are getting used to my body, your body, and their body over there. And then all of a sudden, you've got bodies that are, discarnate, out of body bodies showing up, and it sort of throws the game off. But and also a lot of people that first connect might have it is, I guess it's the left brain that can't process the right brain's connection sometimes. So that's part of why it feels like you're losing your mind. You're losing your left brain, but you're not losing your right mind. The brain being a physical organ and the mind being eternal and un, unrestricted. But a lot of times when people are first connecting, they have a scary experience, as their energies are opening up, and that makes people want to just shut them down.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about it, like, how, I'm just going to put it in a three-dimensional model because that's convenient, but of course it's more like a matrix and phasing in and out of states of being, like molecules of water be precipitating out of a cloud type thing. But if you think of it, if there's source, however you regard that, uh, perfect light, perfect sound, perfect love, and then we kind of we break off like a spark of light and precipitate down through ever and ever denser dimensions until we become crystallized in the physical world. And then, the light of our source breaks through us into the chakra system, and the chakras are the interface between the two worlds. So as we look back sort of to where we came, and I'm not advocating any particular religious viewpoint, but just back through those layers where we're in the denser layer, looking back into higher and higher vibrational planes, the first ones we would encounter are denser. They're the astral realms. They're where people are, I call it the tweener zone, where
Mm-hmm.
people get trapped between the two worlds or choose not to progress on, or are there just to be obnoxious and predatory, you know? So.
So, in the sense of going back to the original question, allowing ourselves not to go crazy as these gifts appear, or as spirits appear to us, are you suggesting to learn more about it, to investigate
Yeah,
it
I
more?
think definitely, learning that and learning how to ground yourself so that you don't freak out, and learning how to protect yourself so that you feel safe when you're encountering that, knowing your rights as a physical being. We often think, oh, wow, spirit is really powerful and they're just popping up everywhere and I have no control over it. Yes, you do, because part of your contract in coming into this life is that you have the right of occupation of your own body, your own mind, your own home, your own vehicle, your own workspace, and learning how to take charge of that energy. You do have the right to do so. You have the right to command spirit, basically. And often people are afraid that somehow they're more powerful than we are. So definitely developing and disciplining your experience so that it can become, and invoking your guides' help and angelic help in protecting that. Angels tend to protect our high soul will, our out of body will, and guides are here to protect our material will, our in body state will. So you would ask your guides specifically to keep people, you know, for instance, I have a deal with my guides. The last time that I was bothered by a spirit, I woke up in the middle of the night. I was eyeball to eyeball with a black slave that was hiding, American slave that was hiding under a porch in absolute terror, stuck in the loop. And when he saw me looking at him as a white woman looking at him, he absolutely just nearly had a heart attack, just from stress.
Mm-hmm.
And I was telling him, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, and I didn't, it was such an intense experience. It was like he was right there in my room and possibly lived somewhere close to where I live now
Mm-hmm.
in Roanoke. I don't know, but I asked my guides. I said, "Don't disturb me at night again," and I have not been disturbed at night. I'm perfectly happy to help, but not during my sleep time.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Anyway, we're here on a commercial break, and we will be right back with Tracey Lockwood.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
And welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are the number one listener supported radio station in the world, and that means we need your support. If you can, please take a moment and make a donation at freedomslips.com. To keep our operation going. We've got hundreds of shows every week, like this one, like Traceys, and it's with your support that we can keep the station going. With that being said, Tracey, where can people find you? Or do you have a website? Are you on Facebook? I know you're on both. Can you give us addresses where people can
Yes,
see you?
yes. Thank you so much. If people wanted to friend me, I'm still taking friends, and that's at facebook.com/psychic medium Tracy, and that's Tracey, Tracy Lockwood, psychic medium Tracey Lockwood. I have a website, and it's got some very interesting links to the YouTube shows from my show and some guests that were very interesting, including you, Bernard, on my
Thank you.
website on the YouTube radio show TV page. And that's at mediumtracylockwood.com. And I'm on Skype and Twitter and uh,
The social sphere.
everything. Yeah, yeah, pretty much. Can't even think of all of them right now, but the main one is my website at mediumtracylockwood.com.
And of course, Tracy will be on the air directly after this show. She's on at 3 p.m. Eastern Time here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So stick around and listen to her show coming up next.
Oh, yes, please do.
Uh, Going back to from a medium's perspective, uh, let's talk a little bit about the process. And I'm sure many people are very curious of how it feels to have that connection. I know that for me, it's really hard to put into words, but when I'm working with a client or if I'm doing a tarot reading, I feel for me it feels like I'm channeling, and actually I usually am channeling my guides, the emissaries of light, and the sensation is almost as if I'm kind of watching myself, and there's this emotional nudge, and I can feel, and the next thing I know, I'm saying what I'm feeling and interpreting that, of course, in the way of seeing it. I'm seeing, I see a conflict, or I'm seeing a resolution or obstacle or something, and then the story starts to tell itself. It's a very strange process for me. When you're doing a reading, Tracy, tell us what it feels like to you. What is the process that you go through, and how do you know when you're in that process?
Well, I have to say that because I do that for a living, I am a professional psychic medium, so I take appointments by phone and for international people by Skype and in my office. For me, there really isn't a process per se, like a ritual, other than I can very quickly snap my brain into that state. What you're talking about, though, is switching your brain from your left brain, your analytical, critical brain, to your right, intuitive side.
Hmm.
And, tools like tarot cards help with that. I think the first tools that we use are our bodies, ooh, that
Yes.
doesn't feel right, or pendulum is a way to use a physical tool, or muscle testing. And then developed more along there is tarot, or looking at stones, lithomancy, tassomancy, looking at clouds, the crystal ball. I do have one, but it's small and I use it for decoration in my house
Right.
because
They're
I
so
like it.
pretty. I
They
love
are
them.
pretty, but for me, I don't use any tools anymore because um, it's easy for me to do that switch
Right.
from the left brain to the right brain. And I like what you said about how information comes in from so many different sources, and we see, hear, feel, and know. And the feeling part of that, the way that I sometimes teach it if I'm doing a group workshop or explain it sometimes teaching one-on-one, is that, if you have someone in your household and they walk into the room behind you and you don't hear them or smell them and they're not making any particular sound, you can just feel them come in behind you and you know who that is. Or if you're walking down one of the greenways, or you're walking, you can feel someone come up behind you. Or if you're walking in a different situation, maybe a more urban situation, or not necessarily, you might feel a sense of, like, you want to avoid this person, or you want to redirect, and what do you do with a creepy person? You just ignore them. You avert your eyes and keep going. But that sense of, like, maybe somebody's following you or something. And for me, if you close your eyes when you're in a crowd full of people, it feels that way. You can sense objects and people around you. You just don't see them in the classic sense. And for me as a clairvoyant, I'm able to see them, but I don't always see them like a full on developed body. I have had spirit appear to me physically, but often when I'm connecting during a reading to someone, I'll get a sense. Often the first thing I feel is the relationship between that person and my client. Maybe your mother's mother is here, or maybe or I might feel a child, and ask them, did you lose a child? Or, you know, you start sort of sensing those relationships, and somehow you just feel, are they male or female? And you can, as you're developing, you can train yourself to do that. Okay, are they male or female? Are they tall or short? Are they, what ethnicity? And then you kind of use your imagination, and people are afraid, oh, if I imagine something, then I'm making it up. No, our imagination is our tool that is available in our dream state, and readings occur between sleep and wake. That's the state that we maintain. We discipline our minds to stay in that place that's between sleep and wake. It's a light trance state. Some people that channel have to go into a deep trance to do so. Edgar Casey, for example, went into he was called the sleeping
Yeah.
prophet, because he would actually have to just check out. And I think that as information comes through that's different than we have a belief system about, or different than we have a knowledge base about, sometimes we have to step out a little further or go into a deeper state of trance. And of course, coming back from that, it's really important to take your time and be able to ground and come back into your body. But most of the time when I'm doing readings, I don't think someone thinks that I'm in a trance state. I just close my eyes or look around them, or sometimes look directly at them, uh, but I'm taking on the characteristics, the mannerisms, the gestures, and speech patterns of the people that they're speaking with. And I'm unaware of some of it myself. I think one of the funniest things that happened when I was channeling someone's mother is and she had come to me for grief counseling, but not in a traditional sense. She wanted to manage her grief by visiting her mother once a month.
Mm-hmm.
So she came to my office, and we're in about the third session, and we were, all of us, very familiar with each other. And her mother said, too many pots spoil the kitchen. And I'm thinking, that's not the expression. My left brain is arguing with my right brain. It's like, and I said, and my client just dissolves into laughter on the other side of the table. And she pulled herself together enough to say she didn't. She did not say that. And I said, yes, that's a quote. I said, I think it's too many chefs spoiled the pot or something. But she goes, no, no, no. She said, I know what she's talking about. When she passed, we found marijuana in her kitchen, and when none of us knew that she smoked. Well, to me, I would never know that. And it's just so interesting the way that spirit chooses to communicate. I think I would probably become bored with it if it was like as easy as someone just standing there and going, tell them this. I mean, sometimes they do say specific things, but more it's the stories and the imagery and the expressions and and then, trying to fit that. I'm thinking of another example of someone's father who came through, and he wanted to start a phrase with "I ain't got no," and I don't talk like that, so I was nervous to say it. I heard it, but and I didn't want to be insulting if he was an educated man or something, and so I just asked her. I said, "Did your father kind of have poor English?" And she said, "Oh yeah." And so that was my red flag, or
Right.
not red flag, green flag or checkered flag to take off. And he just, really took off with the way that he was talking. So it's I don't know, it's almost like living in a fantasy world, or not a fantasy, because I think a fantasy is maybe something we construct with our own mind. It's more like a dream state where it's very receptive and you're just receiving information and conveying it and trying to describe the nuances of what you're getting, because you never know what is important.
Right.
One time I saw roses all the way around my client. I'm like, I'm seeing roses everywhere. They just were roses. And she goes, oh, well, that makes sense because my family name is Rose, and we have lots of people that have passed with that name. So I don't think that it's that mediums are all knowing. I don't think we know any more than the next person. I don't know anything really. I mean, I know what I know, but I don't know anything that would be that. So I'm more like the communicator that just, you know, explains what I see, hear, feel, and sense. And it doesn't always make sense to me, but it always makes sense to my clients.
Yeah, yeah, that's
You know?
I can relate to that. Is it fair to say, just to simplify, for those of us listening and
Sure.
don't understand, or don't necessarily have the skill, is it fair to say that we've been using the word imagination and whatnot, but perhaps maybe it's fair to say that you're connected and sensing them through your mind's eye, and there's an actual interaction going on there in your mind's eye.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like connecting into that part of like the memory projection part of our brain, but it's live. It's a
Yes.
live stream. And so, I notice where the person is standing relative to the person that I'm reading for, which gives me a great deal of information about what type of relationship they have. I can tell if they're not very talkative, that if I'm not hearing something from them, that they might not have been a very talkative person in this life. They show the same. When we pass, we don't change. And people may go, what? But we really don't. We're just in the same state of mind that we're in right before we pass. And there's certain amount of healing that has to occur sometimes, because transitioning can be traumatic, especially after a very long illness or an aggressive or horrific passing. There are traumas that are mind, which is eternal experiences. But of course, anything related to the body would be relieved immediately.
Now, Tracy, speaking of traumatic and whatnot, have you ever had an experience with, for lack of a better term, a malevolent spirit, something not so friendly? And how do you handle something like that?
Well, my guides are under very strict instruction to not, and I work to keep my energies vibrating at a high level. so nothing dark is allowed to approach. But I have brought through, and as I was younger, of course, I've encountered malevolent spirits because they're real too.
Yeah.
But there's a focus, like our energy follows focus. So if our focus is at a higher vibration, if our focus is on service, our focus is on love and light, then that's where our energy follows. But I've had experiences where relatives have come through. One in particular, well, I'll tell you two stories. One was someone who had sexually abused my client. Actually, both of these were examples of that. But this first one was unrepentant, and I could not tolerate his attitude. And my guide had set him on what I call the bench, which is someplace over on the left of me, out of my peripheral psychic vision, where they are so far, they're just like quarantined over there while everybody else is around my clients. And I kind of have my guides organize them. It wasn't sort of like a plan, like, okay, I'm going to sit down with you and you guys are going to it just sort of mutually developed that the father's side of the family is to the left of my client, the mother's side is on the right, and people stand in their generational bands in front of, beside of, and behind, etc. But then once that initial contact is made, then they'll reposition themselves. If they're very eager to talk, they jump up front. If they, are reticent, they might stand really far away or embarrassed or ashamed. The other person that came through was a pedophilic grandfather that came through. And my client, he came through respectfully and jovially, and he was giving a lot of proofs of his existence. I started using railway terminology and saw like a pocket watch, etc. And my client asked a very sobering question. She asked me, did he touch me when I was younger? And all of a sudden, he got very serious, very embarrassed, etc. And he used a metaphor for what had happened there. But he was allowed to participate in the dialogue because he was telling her that he was sorry to the best of his ability. He still had some of his, if you want to think of it as a disability, to have that mindset. He still had that, but he wasn't allowed to he wasn't looking at her that way. He was trying to give the best apology he could because he had gone through his life review and had, when we go through our life review, we don't just like see our whole life go in front of our lives, la-di-da, good, bad, and ugly. We actually experience our life through the awareness of each person that we have touched in our life. So in this case, the pedophilic grandfather had to experience what it was like to be her as a child and to be violated that way. And so for a moment, he had sort of a consciousness that wasn't too cool, to put it as an understatement. And she was able to make some progress having verification for some of the things that happened. And spirit often uses symbols to communicate, or, biblically, Jesus spoke in parables. There's a kind of a kind way when messages are being given in a public setting, or if messages are being given that are a very sensitive nature, they're sometimes couched in terminology that protects the privacy of the client. An example of that would be, I had an ex-lover come through for a lady the other day, and he said, don't let the rhododendrons grow wild. And I had no idea at all what he was talking about. And she just nodded and said, I know exactly. Well, it took me about a month and a half before I figured out that he was talking about the private region being maintained well. You know, like it just didn't make any sense to me. And
Right.
she just smiled and said, I know what he's talking about. That sounds just like him, you know? And
So they still have a sense of humor.
oh my God, yes. And for me, I feel that I have met their family when I'm done. And it's a high privilege to me to be able to have that experience, you know, to reunite
Right.
people that have lost each other. And we think a lot about the grief that people suffer here, but we don't often think about the grief that those spirits are suffering, not able to communicate. And so it's really an incredible dynamic between the
Amazing.
living and the dead.
That's wonderful, wonderful. And Tracy, I can't believe it, but we're out of time,
It's
and
flown
I
by.
I would like to give everybody the opportunity to find out how they can make an appointment with you if they are so moved to do so.
Oh, thank you so much. They can visit my website at mediumtracylockwood.com and they can give me a call or text me at 540-998-9789. And yes, that's my personal cell phone. And I am happy to receive messages by text and we'll schedule a time and then you can prepay on my site. There's a little video by the prepay button there or the payment button that is on how to get a better reading and then the other videos from my shows and
Wonderful.
guests are on that other page there
That's
on the
great.
site.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Tracy. It's always such a pleasure to have you on the show, and I always learn something new. So thank you.
I was thrilled, Bernard, that you asked me. Thank you. You're so kind and so kind to uh, be lifting up what you call the luminary ladies of the Blue Ridge. I have a
Yes.
title now. Yay.
Absolutely, and I'm great. I'm
Thank you,
so happy that
sweetheart.
you're one of them. For everybody, I just want to let you know that next week we are going to be having Brian Forster on the show. You might know him from Ancient Aliens. He is an alternative researcher and archaeologist, well known for his work in Peru, and he's been expanding that work. And he's going to come back on and share that with us. Have a wonderful week.